Hello, hello, hello. I'm Zaki. I like to build blockchains. I work on projects like Sommelier and Cosmos and various other things. I am moderating this panel, which is, the title is inspired by a Vitalik blog post about whether or not the future is cross-chain versus multi-chain. This is a somewhat biased panel of people who've been building multi-chain stuff. We'll try to keep it balanced, though. To my left, we have Ethan Frey. Ethan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ethan Frey. I'm the founder of CosmWasm, creator of CosmWasm, which is on about 20 blockchains in the ecosystem. I'm an IBC maximalist since 2016. Started working on the white paper 2017. So yeah, I fully believe in the view of multi-sovereign blockchains. I love to help build these.
And then Josh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Lee. I'm the co-founder of Keplr Wallet, which is one of the largest Cosmos wallets, as well as Osmosis, which is the largest DEX on Cosmos. And notable achievement, I was the first person to send a mainnet Atom IBC transaction in the world. So,
yeah. Ismail?
Hello, I'm Ismail Kofi. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Celestia, the first modular blockchain network. I've also worked on Tendermint before, so both my history as well as my current position is also very aligned with the idea of an app chain vision.
And finally, Noam.
Hi, everyone. Well, some of you probably just heard me talk. My name is Noam Cohen. I'm the developer relations lead at Interchain. I work, on the Cosmos Hub, and I also work on the Interchain Developer Academy, which is a training program to onboard people into the Cosmos ecosystem.
So, all right. Why don't we get started? Okay. So let's like frame what the debate is. So like cross-chain versus multi-chain. So the idea of cross-chain is there are many blockchains, but they all share one security layer. So like this is the sort of Ethereum 2.0 or Ethereum future vision of where you take the idea of rollups and dank sharding and data availability, and you sort of push them to the limit, and you have all of these different custom all of these different rollup blockchains, and they interoperate, but they don't. There's only one sort of uniform security system, and then you have the multi-chain. The multi-chain vision, which is the vision of different sovereign, independent security systems that are interoperating. All right, so we've had IBC being live for a year. We've had IBC transactions on Cosmos. We've had many bridging protocols. We've had many bridging protocols being hacked. IBC so far not being hacked. So this is kind of the state of play, like lots of blockchains, lots of bridges, lots of different bridging protocols, lots of hacks. Still the future is uncertain. So why did you believe in the multi-chain future back in 2016?
Yeah, I think it was impossible for any one team to build like the perfect blockchain. And this was before bridges were a thing, and I saw this idea of having multiple sovereign blockchains that can make their own design decisions was essential. The same way that the internet couldn't have one server. You can have Google can do amazing stuff, but you can't just leave it in their hands to build the internet, even if they have like AWS. You definitely need this, innovations at the edges. And I think there's not just innovation in dApps. You can run amazing innovation on top of Ethereum or top of other layer ones, but the ability to do much lower level stuff, like building ZK proofs into it. I think what Noam is doing at Penumbra, Zcash, all this stuff is a much lower level, and I think the ability of having that is essential to really innovate in the blockchain space.
Yeah. How have the challenges of UX, though, played out, Josh, in this like multi-chain world?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I think it hasn't been too bad, just because a lot of these multi-chain visions, a lot of different chains actually look very similar, but we expect that to kind of diverge, right? Where you sort of start from a common stack, but the entire point of this multi-chain vision is that you make, each of these community computers make different trade-offs to optimize for different things. And when you do that, you get a lot of diversity, which is a benefit for sovereignty, but trying to build a common infrastructure across all of these things is obviously way more of a challenge than having a monolithic blockchain that you can kind of support. But at the same time, I think the beauty of working in like the crypto ecosystem is being able to abstract a lot of these things and being able to put things into layers. And yeah, it just seems like kind of a step in the process of improvements to come.
So I would say both Ismail and Noam are working partially on projects that are bringing an element of sort of shared security, bringing an element of the cross-chain vision to parts of the Cosmos ecosystem. So Ismail, you want to talk about how does Celestia fit into this whole system?
Sure. I would say that Celestia is very aligned with, as I said before, that the idea that everyone can launch their own blockchain, so that like communities can launch their own chains, but like reduce the friction of like bootstrapping your own like validator network or your own proof of stake network. I would argue that Celestia is exactly in the sweet spot between what you mentioned before, like how Ethereum works, and how Cosmos works today, which is basically everyone like bootstraps really their own chain. Celestia achieves people launching their own chains without limiting them at all by making, like basically removing that need to launch your own chain. If you followed the talk by Mustafa, it's by removing basically the need to execute the state of the chains that are secured by Celestia. While I'd say with like interchain staking, it's more basically via governance, the validators of the hub use the Atom token to secure the chains by essentially launching another validator for the other chain. And this is also very necessary and very good. I would argue that it doesn't scale limitlessly because, first of all, it's also not permissionless in its current form. At least you have to vote. You have to submit a proposal. People have to vote on it, and then validators get spun up. While in Celestia, you can like literally launch it like now. I mean, not now because it's not live yet, but once it's live, or actually our testnet is live, you can play around with it. But once the chain is live, you can literally spin up your own chain without waiting on like a governance proposal to pass or anything. Literally, the vision is that you can like with a click just launch your own chain and have a sovereign roll up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fair point, and this is definitely true, especially at this stage of interchain security. I think what's important to note is that at this particular stage of interchain security, what we're trying to achieve is that there's specific functionality that you might want to have on the hub, but you don't actually want to have it all on the hub. So like what I'm trying to say here is that we had a recent governance proposal whether or not to include the CosmWasm smart contract language on the hub, and the community voted it down. And it wasn't because they didn't like the idea, but it was because they felt that, oh, we shouldn't launch this on the hub because maybe there's an additional security risk, or we're putting many things in the hub. But having a CosmWasm enabled chain in the interchain secured zone, so to speak, in this area, is definitely beneficial to the hub because we can innovate, we can do liquid staking, we can do a whole bunch of other things. So at the first stage, yes, you're right, like this doesn't scale very well, but this is not exactly what we're looking for right now. We're just trying to get functionality inside this sort of like the Cosmos club, if you want to call it, basically close to the hub, that benefits this larger vision of what the Cosmos hub is trying to do. And at a later stage, when we start shipping V2, V3, we might have sort of like an opt-in sort of structure where validators can choose like, hey, I will partly, or like only these set of validators will validate on this specific chain. And then maybe at that point it scales a little bit better because it becomes sort of like a free open market.
Yeah, and I have to say that like interchain staking also has other benefits. For instance, that you get like a uniform interoperability via IBC between the interchain staked. I mean, it uses IBC, right?
Exactly.
So while in Celestia's case, it's more nuanced, right? Like you could also use IBC, but it depends on your execution environment, how it actually works. So there's a bit more nuance there, but you could also say there's a bit more freedom in choosing the execution environment.
I mean, I'm kind of curious, Ethan, what you think about the whole CosmWasm on the hub as well. Sorry to bring that up, but I feel like, for me, the analogy I've always brought, up to people is that IBC is sort of this like TCP/IP, and I feel like CosmWasm was the first attempt at creating this more of this like HTTP environment that people can kind of create within the restrictions, but at the same time, being able to kind of create what you want right away without a standardization process and things like that. But yeah, kind of curious what you think.
Definitely. All right. So first, I think what you said about HTTP is very right, and I think CosmWasm, in a way, not just smart contracting language and VM, but really the first multi-chain VM is IBC native, so you can build, and we built, like in the hackathon, Jake and I both built little contracts. They were able to build new protocols, deploy them with complete security level. We inherited the entire security level of the IBC protocol, and we wrote a little app logic on both sides, and we're able to, interchain accounts and interchain queries, we're able to spin up in a few hours and deploy them that fast. I mean, this is not production version, right? Like, but we, forking some other code, you can add new features quite quick, innovate on it, and explore. So I think it really allows innovation on the IBC multi-chain communication level much, much faster, and experimentation before you say, okay, this is actually what matters, and we can standardize it. So I think it's really the future in a way of the experimentation innovation phase. At the same time, I was not fully supporting or was not completely agreeing on CosmWasm on the hub, although I think the hub needs an IBC center. The problem is the hub's philosophy was minimalism, security, stability first. It's like the Bitcoin. That was its role for a long time, to go slow, whereas the IBC CosmWasm allows experimentation and innovation. So it was almost a philosophical change. And I said there, like, you can change it. You can put it on there, nothing wrong, but you can have a philosophical change on what the hub means. And if you're not ready to do that change, and the whole ecosystem is like, okay, we're changing the vision of the hub, you could do it. I think you are doing it, but in a way. But like, until you have that, you cannot put it on the hub. So, but I think the idea of the interchain security zone is really intelligent. So you say, okay, we can capture value, we can do innovation here, we can get the security here, a high security zone with innovation on it, but keep it off the hub. So maybe in the future, if it changes, but I think it's a much larger discussion to have. It was, yeah.
So do you think that the most important reason for going cross-chain, multi-chain is scaling, or is the most important reason innovation?
I think it's innovation. So you can scale vertically. You can scale really fast. I mean, Solana shows this. If you don't care about decentralization, you can scale pretty high vertically in a way. And it's really, I think, about composability. So you can innovate, and you can do radically different experiments and then compose them.
I think I actually agree with kind of Celestia and Mustafa's vision, and coming to just reality that we are, the layer 0 of blockchains is the social consensus, and when we have humans trying to coordinate, you can build the most efficient consensus mechanism at the code level, but at fundamentally humans are going to disagree in groups, and the only way that you can innovate and scale in that environment is the multi-chain environment.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to this, to be honest.
Well, for the people who didn't see Mustafa's talk, maybe unpack this idea a little bit more about what does it mean in this cross-chain world when we say that the layer 0 is social consensus?
What we mean by this is that people decide what, at the end, people decide what the truth on a chain is. For instance, if there's a fork or anything, or the majority of people disagree on something, they will choose which fork is actually valid. I think Mustafa mentioned that in the sense of Ethereum, if Ethereum would fork today, it's us who decide which like fork has actual value, and it's not just like code that decides this, right? So that's why I like what I like about Celestia as well is like it leaves the fork choice rule to the application layer, right? Instead of forcing this onto one layer like on Ethereum where the canonical chain of any rollup is decided, you can, or you basically on Celestia don't have that option. You have to do the fork choice rule on your application side.
So when there are forks in this multi-chain world, who decides, or like what is the role of bridge protocols and interoperability? How do we do it in Cosmos right now? Does anybody want to talk about that?
How we do it in Cosmos right now?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
sentiment.
feel like Noam should know.
I mean, we don't really. We haven't really figured that one out yet, I guess, right? Or what do you mean?
Well, no, we have the ability to update the
Light client.
the light clients
Yeah, sure.
through
But
governance proposals.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, that's true.
So, you know, in Cosmos right now, and we've done this in the real world in this last year. It's happened where chains have forked. Like for instance, you know, Evmos famously like halted after it got started up at a very rocky birth, and Evmos halted. And then there was this talks about like having a fork of Evmos, potentially like resetting all of the chain state or continuing the chain state. And ultimately, you know, whichever one had existed, what was going to make the choice was all of the connected IBC chains had to vote themselves which client to update, like which to make the new Evmos, whether or not to accept the Evmos, the chain that started up again as the new Evmos chain. And so, you know, if the social layer is the most important layer of blockchains and the layer that matters the most, the social layer gets very interwoven with the interop layer. And I think that is the thing that is the hardest for people to understand is that like when we are building these interop things, we are building this layer of social consensus into the system. That like the interop layer is a big part of the sort of modular blockchain stack.
I'm just sort of like, when you're saying all this, I'm just sort of like thinking, and just wondering to what extent, you know, you can have maybe a central point of authority to you know, maybe even the hub because like imagine you have this Evmos fork, and then one chain says, okay, this is the right light client that we're going to connect, and then the other chain says, okay, this is the right chain, this is the correct fork, and then you have sort of like a problem there, and then they can't suddenly interoperate. They don't have that token functionality anymore. I'm wondering to what extent maybe like the hub could play a role in something like this, in sort of like formalizing that somehow. But yeah, that's just an idea.
Absolutely. What scares you about the IBC world? Like, you know, we have all of these, you know, we have all of these bridge hacks. It's the biggest losses of user funds from the last year have all been failures of bridge protocols. Maybe let's talk about, you know, bridge protocols, their security, how we think about it. What did we do? How is IBC secured? How is Celestia going to secure interop? All of these things.
So, I mean, I think IBC is I'm not very scared with IBC, honestly. I mean, there's possibilities, but I felt like IBC was 6 years of research and development, 1 year in mainnet. It went through very slow, methodical design, coding, testing. A lot of these bridge protocols came late to the game. They realized, like 4 years in the work of IBC, 5 years in, they said, okay, we need a bridge protocol. Now we realize multi-chain matters, cross-chain matters. They build it in a source of months. They launch it. Oh, let's throw a multi-sig here. That's easier than trying to actually handle full validator set updates. And so these were always kind of like, I feel like they're quick and dirty hacks in a way, approximations of IBC. Because they came late to the game, they're trying to launch something, and there's a product need. So it's not surprising to me there's so many hacks. And IBC, it was kind of losing ground. All these bridges launched fast, but like they launched fast and dirty. We weren't engineers heavy. So I'm actually quite stable. What I think the danger I see with IBC is, as the bear market, there are some chains with market caps of 5 million, 10 million connected. And if these chains fork, or like not even fork, are like kind of bought out, if someone decides to, you know, I buy a bunch of tokens, I destroy POS by buying all the tokens, and just like, you know, do bad stuff with this chain, but then all the tokens somewhere else. I think this could be very interesting. Like, what happened to the bad chain when a chain is destroyed? Like, yeah.
For me, the thing that terrifies me is I think IBC as a protocol is as verified and as safe as it can be. But at the same time, most of these bridge hacks, some of them were because of the bridge design, but a lot of them were because of errors in the smart contract or how the person coded the implementation of that protocol. And I think that risk still exists in IBC. And in that case, just making sure we normalize, good light client verification rather than going the like the hacky route of multi-sig verifiers and things like that is the other one thing. And then the other thing I think would be this future market of in this multi-chain world where economic activity is going to happen. There's definitely going to be interchain MEV, and what that's going to look like, I think, is going to be extremely terrifying but potentially also.
You got to explain interchain MEV.
I'll let you do that. I think you'll do a better job at that.
All right. We want to talk about I'll come back to the route back to interchain MEV. But do we want to talk about what's scary?
I wouldn't say necessarily it scares me, but I agree that IBC is like very solid and that it's been around for a while and everything. But like Ethan Frey,
I've paid everyone off to say this.
It's not true. But anyways, Ethan Frey and then others, like and also the Evmos team, they're building basically to make it easier to build applications on top of IBC. And I think that in the first years might also lead to similar bugs as we've seen in the most recent hack. It was just a bug, like as a programming bug. CosmWasm is based on Rust. This bug wouldn't have happened in Rust with an option, I think. But still, there will be other categories of bugs there. And then Evmos with Solidity, like having cross-chain smart contracts, might cause. I almost bet there will be like bugs. We will see hacks, but more on the application layer, not on the like core IBC layer necessarily. So IBC applications, when we see that, I'm not scared of it, but we will see hacks and bugs in the first few years. And one thing I wanted to say to what Ethan mentioned as well with like low market cap chains. I think. Again, this is an indicator that we need something like state fraud proofs and a shared security layer, even if it's maybe optional for IBC connected chains.
Okay, what is a state fraud proof?
Oh, a state fraud proof is basically if some validator set agrees on, because you bought out the chain, you control the validator set, and then some validator set, majority of it, commits to an invalid state transition. You can prove that via submitting the data onto Celestia and then creating basically, you could think of a state fraud proof as like a single fraudulent transaction or like a full block that is invalid and is posted somewhere available to you that you can retrieve and then replay the transactions. And it guarantees you that you don't even have to trust the majority of the validators of such a low market cap chain, for instance.
Okay, let's try and like systematize this for everyone. What does IBC do right now? And then would it do in some future world where there were state fraud proofs?
So, currently there is a very similar concept in IBC, which is like this misbehavior, right? Like if you double sign, you can submit basically a fraud proof, not a state fraud proof, but like misbehavior is a fraud proof to the other chain. And a double sign is easy to verify. You have two signatures, and you verify signatures in IBC anyway. So, but currently, if there was like a fraudulent transaction in the block in IBC, there's no way to prove it to the other chain, right? And that you could do to the other chain via such a state fraud proof. The challenge is that you need to be able to execute the other chain execution environment. That's the tricky part.
Got anything to add?
Not specifically to that, but in terms of risks, yeah, I mean, there's always the chance that something goes wrong on a different chain. For example, like what happened with Terra. And when you see large liquidity move from other chains, you need some kind of a safeguard. And I think, at Osmosis, like Dave was talking about this, that maybe there's some kind of a way to build some kind of a safety mechanism that when you suddenly see on a channel like a large percentage of tokens suddenly come over, the chain just stops, because you can't wait for the validators to come in and say like, oh ho, let's halt the chain or something. So you want to maybe create some kind of safety measure, and it would be nice if we could do that at a protocol level actually. So that's some of the challenges I think that we still need to work on.
I was supposed to explain something, but I don't remember what it was. Oh yeah, MEV. Okay, so hot topic in the world of blockchains these days is this concept of MEV, which is this idea that you can extract value from the transaction ordering. So, lots of teams in the world of blockchains are thinking about all kinds of clever ways, encrypted transactions, zero knowledge, like privacy preserving transactions, all of these things, to say, hey, we're going to make sure that the validators cannot actually extract value from the users because they can't see what's in the transactions. But if you think about any sort of multi-chain system, you had to say what you were going to do on this other chain on the origin chain. So you say, oh, I want to move 500 atoms from the Cosmos hub to Osmosis. That has to be more or less public. There isn't an easy way to keep that private. And so someone who is observing this might be able to guess, oh, what are you going to do with those atoms? Maybe you're going to buy some Osmo. And maybe go buy some Osmo to sell to drive the price up, and then sell it to you in the meantime. So this idea of cross-chain basically introduces a new area of sort of protocol value extraction that is going to get broken up among validators, stakers, MEV generators, et cetera. And this is, I think, probably going to be, as we go into 2023, a big part of the cross-domains and the cross-chain story. Thoughts about MEV?
I think cross-chain for me, I'll number a bit. For me, the fear of me is not so much with the Cosmos that's insecure and it's going to break, but the lack of imagination in a way. I think the whole idea, the whole dialogue, the whole picture of cross-chain has been directed by Ethereum, which is late to the game, and doing bridges, which have been hacked. And they're all afraid of how do we move tokens here to there, right? And Cosmos has been moving tokens. In this block near, they mentioned remote accounts. Cosmos has that already. Between many, many chains, they can actually remote contract call. This is very recently released, but it's working, right? So I think for me, this technology is here, it's working, and for me, the question is, do we have imagination to use it? Not technically, but build systems. How do you do this? And can we imagine? I had a very interesting talk last night with an economist, and it was like, what's multinational corporations? What does it look like? What cross-chain collaboration? We have contracts between chains, but what do you do? How do you have a protocol, an AMM that lives on two chains, right? Do you have sub-protocols? Do they balance stuff? They have a special trusted connection. How about a governance protocol on one chain that controls a DeFi protocol on another chain, right? How does that work? What security levels you have there? Where do you extract value? How do you collaborate between different protocols, and where are the boundaries between them? Is the boundary in the interchain, or do you have a subsidiary company in another blockchain that can interact locally with other composition? So I think these concepts, not just technically building them, but actually turning them into economic products and making valuable constructions in DeFi world or in governance or in the blockchain in general. What are the valuable constructions you can do with this beyond moving tokens and beyond saying, okay, great, I can have a DAO that stakes Atom, right? What can we build with that? And I think that's really a huge question they've left unanswered. And I think my fear is a lack of imagination to really build it out. Because it's being so dominated about, oh, can we trust this? Can we trust this? The discussion is not what can we actually do if we can trust it?
So that was a great segue because, we had the first in-person hackathon since IBC went live, last weekend. Thank you, Erica, for organizing it. what have you seen, not just from the hackathon, but like, from being here and talking to, developers across the cosmos? What are the kinds of apps that could exist now in this cross-chain world that, are so compelling and so exciting that people should, be excited about the cross-chain world?
I think the apps, I didn't see amazing ones. There I said this is like a whole new market that you can imagine, but the pretty cool one is you basically using them as Oracle services, trusted Oracle services. So pulling from multiple dexes without having any trusted oracles. So like rather than waiting for Chainlink to support something, you could pull IBC feeds from multiple oracles and would actually create a virtual AMM using these price feeds, which is an interesting product from multiple, like pulling from both the Juno, Swap, and Osmosis and Ziff chain using that. It's pretty interesting.
What about you, Josh?
I think for me, as I'm betting on the future of crypto being multi-chain, right? And in this world, as someone who's mostly just built wallets and on the UX side of things, I think it's interesting where traditionally you sort of have one account on one blockchain, but now that's going to get abstracted to you existing on multiple chains. And for wallets to kind of accommodate for that world where you are on multiple chains, and how do you kind of resolve some of these traditional standards that like crypto has worked with for the past 10 plus years to be more interchain native, because you do want to make sure it's compatible, but at the same time you want to make sure it doesn't get in the way of making improvements, and finding that careful balance will always be an extremely interesting new frontier for building apps.
I was unfortunately not able to participate in the hackathon. So I think I'm going to say what I want to see built instead. What I would like to see to be built is one thing that I mentioned before, IBC with state fraud proofs. You could call it optimistic IBC or state fraud proofs and IBC. The other thing I would really like to see is the other way around, where you don't need state fraud proofs, but use IBC together with validity proofs. So like a ZK proofs or like ZK IBC, I guess. I don't know how to call it. It's more infrastructure than applications, but I think it would unlock even further applications, to be honest, and especially with the one with validity proofs, where you don't have to like wait for a fraud-proof window, would unlock like immense potential, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think for me it's also quite a UX thing, actually. I want to see that we get to a stage where users are not even sort of like aware that they're on IBC. They're just interacting with applications, and this whole complexity of like moving tokens to another thing, or like keeping track of token, which token fungibility and which channel they're on, etc. I think that needs to get away. And what we saw also in the Hack Atom is like one project particular, they built like sort of like a DEX aggregator, and it showed you just which tokens you had, but it had a little icon of like where that token actually was. But you could do native swaps between these tokens, and it did some atomic swapping basically in the background for you. That was what the chain's purpose was. And I think sort of like these abstractions layers, that abstraction layers that are going to come on top, is sort of like where it's really going to get interesting. And it's going to start first in DeFi and token transfers, but at some point I feel, not fear, I hope, that this is going to happen on many more interesting things as well. And especially also what Josh was saying, naming identity and these kinds of things to become very vital.
So is there anything that we haven't been talking about that you guys would like to talk about? I can ask some questions in the meantime, but just, we have a few minutes. We're getting close to 5 minutes left, and so if there are things that we haven't been talking about that we should talk about, you have something.
Just wondering if anyone has anything they want to throw at us, maybe. But I don't want to steal your show.
You can always steal my show. It's not my show. Let's see. What are the other pieces that I think people find confusing about this? What do you think is going to happen with all these different programming languages, right? Like the cross-chain future means that we have like Move and Sway and Solidity and Cairo and all these other programming languages. How does all this get sorted out?
That's interesting. I think they'll all have their niche. And I think as long as the bridges and IBC and multi-chain is just moving tokens, it's totally normal, right? So you write a token on a blockchain, you're writing move, and you pipe it over there, and it's running on CosmWasm, you pipe it to the EVM, it moves it over to another blockchain using Swift, like Cairo. You can move it around, and that's fine, and then it does its special purposes on that blockchain. But I think the really interesting one is when you have these more advanced protocols, like remote accounts. Your remote account has to execute in a totally different environment. How do you create a transaction that runs on Cairo when you're writing your contract in EVM calls into Cairo through that? I think that's going to be really, really hard. And I think it's really, this high level of interoperability might only work when they're on the same stack, really. And they'll like actually have to go down to lower level interoperability when they totally don't speak the languages.
Any other thoughts on this?
I pretty much agree with Ethan. I mean, one thing that I believe, I mean, I think all of these like languages has their purpose and will exist. But I think like some like larger ecosystem languages like Solidity, maybe Rust will be around like for a longer time, while more esoteric stuff might never really gain traction. Other than that, I think I'm very aligned with everything Ethan said.
I think one thing I would like to add is I'm personally not qualified to comment on the technical pros and cons of languages, but I think one thing that is important is acknowledging the fact that which language gets adopted has just as much of like, an ecosystem and application and the economic perspective of a language just as much as, the technical and is it easy to use and is your infrastructure around it? Because, people will build on languages where there is most opportunity and economic activity, and that's a factor that sometimes gets left out when we have technical discussions. So.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I can't add anything to that. Yeah.
Neat. We're winding down. I guess then the last question is really just what's the Valhalla? Like, what does this look like next year, 5 years from now? What is your ideal vision of the future?
Wow. Let's talk about blockchain future and just the multi-chain future right now, because there's lots of vision to the future. But I think it's about collaboration, coordination at much larger scales. I think there's been a lot of these walled gardens, and with IBC starting to bring down the walls, and really not just have, okay, we have two different dexes, and they're kind of competing. How do they collaborate? How do they merge? And I think addition for me is like actually cross-chain mergers and stuff like that. Will that work? We have competing protocols. Actually, in a way, you say Osmosis, Dex, and GenoSwap kind of are in the same space. And when there's tight collaboration, will they actually become one somehow? Will they merge? Will there be different pieces that belong to one governance token? Like, how would that work and how do you collaborate? So first, just like, how to get DEXs running on different chains, how do you have DAOs running on different chains, and then how do you kind of merge across chain? How do you build the equivalent of multinational? I think that's going to be a really interesting experiment. And then, again, economies of scale. So I think, in a way, that will allow Cosmos to step up as an ecosystem over 15 chains to stand up as like, as a market big as some other large chains.
For me, I think cross-chain governance is a big thing. I think this multi-chain vision is the acceptance of the fact that people have different opinions on things and they will execute on things differently. And for them to coexist, you need, both of them need to be able to have sovereign computers. I would like, and I think, the multi-chain vision is selling on this idea that diversity is, it's going to happen, and let's coordinate on the protocol, on chain, rather than, argue about it on existing Web 2 platforms and things like that. And
I think we will see more and more chains that, for instance, currently run on some layer 1 will turn into application-specific chains and will run their own chains. I mean, we've seen this with DOI/DX. I think we will see a few more like large protocols turn into like sovereign zones or sovereign rollups or rollups in general. And I believe that we will see more and more like different IBC clients from just that the current one that's everywhere used is the Tendermint one. I think we will see at least 3-4 major like other clients used a lot, and I think that's it.
We got 10 seconds left, so I'll just say, in terms of vision, I agree. In terms of what I want to see, I'd like to see Tendermint running on top of IBC.
Nice.
Well,
Talk to me if you want
that's
to
a big
learn what I mean
idea, and we don't have time. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for listening.